Glory to Ukraine. I'm Natalia Staropravo. We are at the Media Center Ukraine. This is the 100th day of the full-scale war of Russia against Ukraine. With us, we have Serhii Horbachov, the Education Ombudsman of Ukraine. Greetings. Let's start with a question about the schooling of the children in the occupied territories and the conditions for their education. If they are studying, it is a major problem. Mostly the schooling had been terminated. The academic year is over or is coming to the end shortly. In some situations, the occupants have forcibly extended the academic year in order to impose their curricula and try to pour poison into the hearts and minds of the Ukrainian children. And that is perilous. And that is an act of an educational genocide defined by the international law. Tell us about the Ukrainian educators. Are the Russian invaders forcing them to work with the children, or are they bringing in the Russian teachers? That differs. We can proudly state that most Ukrainian educators have resisted the Russian urges and threats and have stayed faithful to Ukraine and haven't sided with the Russians and are not teaching following the Russian curricula. There have been cases when the teachers have collaborated with the enemy, whether for their lack of caution or for financial gains as they made promises, or when the people are support of the Russian world and have been indoctrinated, then perhaps they side with the Russians. But most, the vast majority, haven't, and we are most grateful to them. Thank you, all the educators, for staying true to Ukraine and staying true to their professional duty. We have questions in the audience. I'm Matvey Shevchenko, Media Center of Ukraine. If I could ask you about the situation with the admission to Ukrainian universities and colleges, which is to happen soon. It's likely that many students will not be able to apply to universities because they're abroad or elsewhere. Some other universities have been ravaged and will not be able to open their doors to the Ukrainian students. How shall Ukraine tackle these challenges? You're perfectly right. We find ourselves in a predicament, and I would consider two separate tracks that are interlinked, yet they're different. Usually, this external independent testing was part of the graduation campaign for the school leavers, and it was part of the admission campaign. It was one of the requirements of the universities. This year, we have banned the graduation tests for the 9th-year-old and the 11th-year-old school children, and children will take a simplified graduation test, which is called the multidisciplinary test. And that will help us administer the test and also be able to use it as a grounds for fair, equitable, and equal access to higher education. For the children in occupation, we cannot organize the testing session even in theory. We cannot administer the national multidisciplinary test, so those wanting to take it will have to seek ways to go to the Ukraine-controlled territory. The national multidisciplinary test will be administered at the testing centers both Ukraine and abroad. Many countries have supported us in this initiative and are organizing testing centers for the Ukrainian school leavers. And we will need to have it done. And the preparations are being made. Today, we have the 3rd of June, and by the 7th of June, the school leavers have to go to their office and confirm their willingness to take the national multidisciplinary test. Then we will analyze the applications for the test and the testing centers that they can be offered. And then in late June, starting the 25th of June until the 7th of July, the school leavers will have to finally make up their mind which testing center they will able to arrive at in order to take the multidisciplinary test. So this is the next upcoming step. As for the admission to the university, the criteria will be very different for apparent reasons. Until the 31st of May, the universities had to approve their admission regulations and make them public on their websites. So I would urge all the school leavers and the university applicants to go to the websites of the universities that they seek to join and check the procedure. As for the number of school leavers and admission to the higher education facilities, the universities and colleges, it's hard for us to make any estimates. At this point, the number of school leavers can be smaller, as many children are now staying abroad, but we can clearly say that many children who have gone abroad are determined to apply to the Ukrainian universities. And to make that happen, will be taking the national multidisciplinary test. As of early week, there were 15,000 such Ukrainian students abroad. You can check the recent numbers at the website of the Ministry of Education and at the Educational Center for the Assessment of the Quality of Education. The thing is that many school leavers will not be applying for the budget paid majors but contracted studies, and they have a separate procedure. They won't all accept the multidisciplinary test. Some specialties will admit students based on the application, motivational essays, and an interview. I urge the people to check that at the relevant website of the universities. Can I ask you a broader question? How can Ukraine preserve the quality of education in the context of this brutal invasion? The quality of the Ukrainian education hinges on the Ukrainian army performance. The quicker we shall restore the territorial sovereignty of Ukraine, the faster we can liberate the area, repulse the invaders, and gain control over the territories and of the system of education. Indeed, the question you have posed is very broad, and the answer would take 3 or 4 hours. But in a nutshell, the challenges are vast. A lot is being done, still more needs to be done. But the key priority for us now, before the onset of the academic year, is to receive a clear understanding of the educational losses the Ukrainian students, school students, and university students have sustained because of the pandemic and the armed aggression of the Russian Federation. We know that we have lost out on education. They are significant, but we cannot specifically assess the losses sustained and what do we need to do to recuperate the losses. So the question of the educational assessment has always been on top of our agenda. We have always prioritized the assessment of the quality of education. So we need to make the assessment to know what we need to restore. And we don't have the clarity yet. We need to make sure we gain it. So now the schools, the universities in Ukraine have to start thinking, how do they do it at their institutional level? How do they designate the educational losses and the way to make up for them? And this is something that we should be addressing urgently. Thank you, Serhii. We had the Education Ombudsman of Ukraine, Serhii Horbachov, with us now. Please follow our announcements. The next meeting is coming up at 12:30. Please stay Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 100th day of the Russian invasion and 9th year of Russian-Ukrainian war. I'm Marie Shevchenko. On behalf of Media Center Ukraine team, I would like to welcome all the journalists covering our fight for freedom. Our next guest is Alexei Makeyev, Special Representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for Sanctions Policies. Alexei, if I may begin the conversation with the sixth package of sanctions brought in by the EU against the Russian Federation, let us start with the broad picture first. The result we're receiving this day is a defeat or a victory. It is a victory, as only 3 months ago the world could not even comprehend the discussion that Europe would renounce Russian energy supplies. Today, we've seen the fifth package of sanctions bring in sanctions on coal, and sixth package of sanctions imposes sanctions on Russian oil. Surely we have all been following that the discussions went on for at least a month in the EU, and the initial proposals about the total ban on Russian oil have stalled a few steps short of the full embargo, same as the oil delivered by pipeline. To this effect, we are somewhat disappointed. But in our further discussions with European partners, we'll keep insisting that in the mid-term prospect, we need to aspire to a full ban on Russian fossil fuels in the EU. And we have already started these negotiations already. The reason behind the disappointment is that the embargo leaves the exception for oil deliveries through the pipelines. Why was it so important to secure the total ban on Russian fossil fuels? Is just a matter of economy, or is it a political and psychological factor? Definitely, sanctions go far deeper than just the economy or the hardship for the company manufacturing one product or another. Today, we see the Russian Federation becoming a pariah state and is treated as a pariah state. And the sanction pressure on the Russian economy has to be felt by the Russian nationals. The arguments we used to persuade the European partners included how can we continue paying Russia 600 to 800 billion euro a day, funding the continued Russian aggression and Russian war machine. So the full disconnection of oil, gas, coal, and further financial sanctions taken together can yield a positive result and strike a crushing blow to the Russian economy that the Russian society is bound to feel. We know that the sanctions before the 24th of February hurt the Russian economy. We know the numbers. In 2013, the revenues per capita, or GDP rather, per capita in Russia comprised $16,000, but in 2020 it fell down to $10,000. But even such losses proved to be ineffective to stop Russia in its tracks. What do you counter the critics who say that economic sanctions are not a speedy solution to stop the war? Indeed, the economic sanctions have effect in the mid and long term perspective, but taken together, uh, in addition to the aid we are receiving from our partners in terms of weaponry and ammunition, sanctions come next as the impactful tool. Sanctions basically are a diplomatic weapon. This is the most effective and productive diplomatic weapon, and we need to deploy it as a high technology, advanced, guided, right, smart weapon. We have a question for the audience. Let's see. Greetings. I am Natalia Staroprava from the Media Center Ukraine. Throughout the lengthy war in Ukraine, Europe has been using Russian gas. Why did it not concern them? Did they not feel ashamed to continue using Russian gas? And what is going to change in Europe? What will the consequences be in Europe? And will Europe seek any alternatives? I would say that the world has seen Russia making preparations for a large scale war, and we're hoping that this would not come to pass. The brutal attack and the unleashed annihilation of Ukrainian state and Ukrainian people committed by Russia has served as an eye opener for the many. After the footage of Bucha, you'd find it difficult to find a person in Europe who wouldn't sympathize with Ukraine, who wouldn't have changed their attitude to Russia, country, Russian people, and the atrocity crimes committed by the Russian army. Therefore, our partners, the United States, Canada, the UK, have immediately renounced Russian oil and gas, while the EU and some European countries have been very dependent on the Russian energy supplies. Yet today, the EU has brought in the right decision for the future of weaning themselves of the dependence on Russian fossil fuels for good, as this is a gas pipe of a country does not deserve any respect, nor does its government deserve any respect. I believe we are on the right path. The involvement of the experts, Ukrainian journalists, Ukrainian society is about persuading the Europeans that this is feasible, that we can do without Russian oil and gas. And there are some specific proposals made to this effect, and they were published recently by the International Working Group on Russian Sanctions. This is a group otherwise known as Yermak Mafol Group, which published a roadmap for the implementation of a policy of a full embargo on Russian fossil fuels with the right economic calculations and projections. And we are drawing on such developments as we engage with our partners. Alexei, since I last had the honor of working in the Ukrainian diplomacy, I know that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has deemed you as the most authoritative expert on sanctions. And you might feel a bit odd today. You see the sanctions brought in that you've been advocating for years. And we've got to ask, why haven't you heard us before? But what served as a trigger this time? The West perceiving the real threat emanating from Russia, the public opinion swaying, or something else? It was the Russian atrocity crimes committed. The people in Europe have seen the Bucha massacre, have seen the razing of Mariupol, have seen the devastation of the Ukrainian towns, cities, and villages. Hundreds Ukrainian children massacred by Russians, 100,000 people who've been abducted and forcibly deported into Russia. The world has seen million Ukrainians seeking refuge in Europe. The world has woken different on the 24th. And indeed, and we have pursued the sanctions track before. Yet, every time it appeared that our partners make one short less and one short too late as they bring in sanctions. This is a personal story I'd like to share. On the 24th of February, early morning, I had to make a presentation before the ambassadors of NATO, uh, member states, about the need to bring in preventive sanctions to preempt a full-scale aggression of the Russian Federation. Imagine the ambassadors appearing when my first phrase that I told them was, "Haven't we told you? Haven't you seen?" And the reason why the sanctions were brought in with such speed and such reach um, was the result of the aggression. And indeed, sanctions have turned into a mighty diplomatic weapon. Let's look into the future. What are the priorities for you? Where shall we exercise the sanctions pressure? And what sanctions can we look forward to? Our priorities, starting now, will be to bring in the new package of sanctions. The sixth package of sanctions has been brought in already. Dozens other sanctions have been brought in by Canada, the US, the UK. And importantly, Ukraine sits at the table with those bringing in the sanctions, as the sanctions can only be effective if made by a cohort of countries. And now the sanctions coalition numbers over 40 countries of the world, and Ukraine is among the coalition. It is coalesced to support Ukraine. The next priorities are threefold. Firstly, the extension of the energy sanctions. Secondly, it's about financial sanctions, the full ban on Russian gas and oil, combined with full disconnection of the Russian financial system from the global financial system, capable of doing great harm to the Russian economy. The second economy element is the broadened individual sanctions list, covering all the aiders and betters of the crime of aggression, all those who helped perpetrate the war crimes. In Ukraine, the coalition team, and here I have to express my gratitude to the experts, to the analysts, the investigators from the National Agency for the Prevention of Corruption, who have helped us draw up the list comprising 12,000 individuals and 3,000 legal entities that we are urging our partners to sanction. So our ongoing negotiations with partners will be about prioritizing the sanctions for the 15,000 individuals. And the third element is about the painstaking effort aimed to close all the loopholes that Russia and its proxies are trying to dodge sanctions. So this is a three-pronged attack: the financial and economic sanctions, personal sanctions, and closing the loopholes to evade sanctions. It's the 100th day of the full-scale aggression of Russia, and this is a very sad, tragic landmark where we stop and recap. So how has this war shaped diplomacy? Since the year 2014, I would make a joke that the diplomats are working 25 hours a day as they get up an hour earlier. The impression is that now this day is unmeasured, and the diplomatic corps is robust and resilient as ever, I amass at the energies people find to fight the diplomatic front. And to answer your question, we have to say this is the energy that we harness from our fighters in the front line, those fighting in the Ukrainian army, as we know that they are relying on us to do our part. And we feel we have to deliver more weapons for them to use, that we need to put more sanctions pressure on Russia. We need to rally for more support to Ukraine, financially wise, and so that we can build a stronger coalition to support Ukraine. That would be an ample contribution that we can make for our part to bring our common victory closer. Is the world democracy evolving? Indeed, the world democracy is evolving, is becoming harsher, less willing to compromise, as we have more arguments and evidence to support the claim that we can only defeat Russia if we stand united, if we stand united as a country and if we stand united as a civilization. And the last question, when you recall the first 100 days, what moments will stick up in your mind? I will recall the moment when we first met in the early days of war, and I saw many ambassadors fighting back tears, when I saw my colleagues fighting back tears, and specific steps our partners started making to assist us. And I really hope that that impetus is going to stay strong. And I urged everyone to visit Kiev right now, these days, and we shall celebrate all together. Alexei Makeyev, Special Representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for Sanctions Policies. Thank you for this conversation. Greetings. I'm Natalia Staropravo from the Media Center Ukraine. Today we shall talk to Andrius Tapinas, a Lithuanian TV anchor who helped raise over 5 million euro in Lithuania to buy a Bayraktar for Ukraine. Today we'll have a chance to discuss how the money raised will be spent.
Hi, Andrews.
Hello, my pleasure.
So my question, why does Turkey decide to make such a gesture?
An excellent question, and we are still trying to come to terms to this decision of theirs. Our Minister of Defense yesterday called me and said, Andrews, I have some very interesting news from our negotiations with Turkey. So I think we were quite amazed by the solidarity that ordinary people, ordinary citizens of a very small country, Lithuania, with population less than 3 million, managed to raise almost 6 million. Our final tally is 5,955,000 euro in just 3.5 days in order to buy a combat drone Bayraktar for Ukrainian army. So they decided that they are not going to take the money of the people. Instead, they are going to gift us a fully equipped Bayraktar drone. It's a gift to Lithuania, and obviously, the Lithuania immediately will give it to Ukraine after equipping it with weapons. So our television, which is collecting this fundraiser, will transfer 1.5 million euros to the Ministry of Defense of Lithuania for them to buy necessary modern weapons to equip our Bayraktar and to prepare it for imminent combat in the skies of Ukraine.
And how did you manage to raise about 5-6 million euros? Tell us, please.
Well, I think everybody is speaking about how tired we are already of supporting the Ukraine during these 100 days of war. So I think it's bullshit. Sorry, pardon my French, but and we wanted to prove it that at least our nation, the nation of Lithuania, is not tired to help Ukraine, not only in thoughts and prayers on our Facebook likes, but also in providing the money to buy a heavy weapons. So I think the idea of ordinary people pitching in and together buying a very serious weapon, and Bayraktar is very serious, deadly weapon, which already destroyed several Russian tanks, Russian ships, Russian command posts. The Ukrainian warriors are even singing songs about it. So I think that idea clicked. And that's why we had such a massive, massive unity in our country. And after this message went viral on Twitter and on other social networks, we started receiving donations from all over the world, starting from Latvia and ending with Australia and Japan. Of course, these donations are just a small percentage, maybe 5 or 6% of the whole sum. So the majority of this money was collected by simple Lithuanians, because the average of donation was around 50, 60 euros. It ranged from 1 euro to 10 to 100 to 500. We have all just 3 or 4 large donations over 10,000 euros. And if I'm not mistaken, the largest donation is 30,000 euros. So there wasn't like one big businessman or oligarch, Lithuanian oligarch who would just join and say, okay, I'm going to donate 1 million euros to this cause. But I don't blame them. I mean, it was such a lightning action. I expected 3 weeks. We got it done in 3.5 days. So I expect that we just simply didn't have time to react. And I'm ecstatically happy about the result, about the help that we are providing. And of course, the gift from Turkey, just as poker players say, doubles it up. So we provide the Bayraktar to Ukraine. We equip it with great weapons, and we still have 4.4 million left for other charity for Ukraine, for defensive purpose, for logistical purpose. So now my primary task will be to find a way how to spend this money most efficiently and to help Ukraine as fast as possible in that field that it needs the most. So I'm going to consult the both ministries of defense in Lithuania and Ukraine, ambassadors, war leaders, and we are going to make decisions how we are going to spend this money. And we will give a full report to all Lithuanian people who donated for them to see that everything is crystal clear and transparent.
We have some questions from the audience. Let's take the microphone.
Andrews, my name is Andriy Shevchenko. I am with Media Center Ukraine. I wonder what kind of lessons and conclusions you take away from this whole story. I think it's a very impressive operation. Common people collecting money for a combat drone, then one government buying a drone from a different country to help a third party, and then this extraordinary gesture by the Turkish. What does it tell you about the complexity and the interconnectivity of the world? What does it tell you about the people? Does it make you feel better about the world we live in, even in these tragic times?
Absolutely. We have dark days and dark thoughts, and we have thoughts of dawn and early morning and optimism. So this action brings me a ray of hope. Also, we just felt the power of social networking, not only in one country, but throughout all the world. We connected to the same idea. We managed to make our goal and even surpass it. We united our country, my country, to one goal. So it is possible to do that in a record times. So there is a lot of ticks and marks that we had in this, as you said, quite a complex issue. However, I think this is not the end, because now I'm receiving quite a lot of feedback from other countries in the world who are saying, can we do it? And I've been giving a lot of interviews on various TV channels and radio talk shows all over the world, from Australia to Canada. And I always try to stick to the message to the people of that country. If a tiny Lithuania, as I said, 2.8 million population, managed to do this in a record time and managed to break, I think, all the historical records, just think of what the mighty people of France, Germany, United Kingdom, Canada, and so on could do, because we show that there is a way for common people to arm the Ukraine while the politicians are mulling and don't want to make risky decisions and maybe are starting to think that maybe we can appease the Russia. So now the will of Lithuanian people has been proudly and loudly announced. I think there might be a time for the voice of other countries as well.
Okay, we have some questions, please.
I do not know if you will have a chance to hold the drone in your own hands, but if you do, would you put any signs on it or any pictures? What would you write on it if you had a chance?
We do have a chance, because we have agreed with Turkish side that we are going to put flags of Lithuania and Ukraine on this drone Bayraktar. And also, we just started like 1 hour ago a national poll in order to choose a name for our drone, and the Turkish agreed to put that name on the plane as well. So it will be the fully named, fully symbolized as a symbol of eternal friendship between Lithuania and Ukraine. In 3 weeks, it's amazing timetable, because you can imagine how long is the queue to buy a Bayraktar for commercial buyers. And they just took all stops out. They said, we're going to provide you in 3 weeks. So our plane, the plane of Lithuanian Air Force, will fly to Turkey. bring the Bayraktar down. We're going to sign the documents, show it to the public very fast, and as soon as possible, we are going to transfer it to Ukraine. Where? We don't know, and we don't want to know, and we don't want Russians to know. Maybe in some time, when it's safe, we'd like to receive a video where our named drone is destroying Russian tanks. That's all that we need.
Andrews, maybe do you plan to visit Ukraine?
Actually, I've been to Ukraine 1 month ago. I went there with a humanitarian convoy. I went as deep as to Dnipro, Zholtye Vody, almost up to Kharkiv. We brought humanitarian aid, and we brought 5 buses, empty buses, and then we took some refugees from Mariupol, from Kharkiv, from Zaporozhye, and we brought them safely back to Kaunas. So I saw Ukraine in my own eyes. I saw the war. I saw the Russian rockets during the night flying to Vinnytsia over our heads. So I touched the war a little bit. And my next visit, I already planned it. I think we are going to do massive fundraiser for that visit. We're gonna put hundreds of Lithuanians on planes, and we are gonna fly and help for Ukrainians to rebuild your beautiful country. And we are going to work by day, and we are going to party and celebrate our victory by night.
Thanks so much, Andrew Stepanas, TV presenter from Lithuania. It's all for today. Expect the next events in the Media Center Ukraine. We will definitely win together.